Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Carey Martin with the Texas Farm Bureau Radio Network. We're proud to broadcast on 124 radio stations across the Lone Star State each day. Thank you for joining us today for the J.L. Pharmacus Regional Webinar Series. This is the third of a series of webinars that allows you to hear from farmers about issues that are unique to their crops and livestock in their region. Today's webinar features farmers from Texas and the Mid-South. Now, as a reminder, J.L. Pharmacus represents more than 50 print, radio, and digital ag media partners throughout the country, including the Texas Farm Bureau Radio Network and the Voice of Louisiana Agriculture Radio Network. We're also excited to receive the results of the 2021 Ag Media Research Study, which measured ag radio listenership from the Pacific Northwest down to Texas and into the Southeast this year. According to that study, all J.L. Pharmacus radio partners from the Pacific Northwest down to the Southeast were number one in ag radio listenership. We're also proud to be the number one ag radio property here in the state of Texas, here at the Texas Farm Bureau Radio Network. Now, a few reminders before we get started today. First, you can submit questions in the Q&A, and we'll try to answer those questions toward the end. We will not be offering a chat during the program. Let's get started today with introductions of our panelists. We have three farmers and ranchers from Texas and Louisiana who have graciously volunteered their time for today's webinar. First up is Richard Fontenot. Richard is a 4,500-acre rice and soybean farmer who also raises crawfish in Ville Platte, Louisiana. Richard is a fifth-generation farmer. His operation has been in the family for over 100 years. He currently farms with his brother. Richard is chairman of the Louisiana Rice Research Board and is third vice president of the Louisiana Farm Bureau Federation. Our next panelist is Alicia Schwartner. She's a cotton, wheat, and silage grower from Miles, Texas. Alicia has an agronomy background and farms with her husband on his family's fourth-generation cotton farm. Alicia is a member of the Texas Young Farmers and Ranchers Committee. And our third panelist is Michael White. Michael is a cattle, cotton, and wheat producer from Vernon, Texas. He's a fourth-generation Texas farmer and rancher, and he farms with his brother. Michael is a former vice president of the Texas Farm Bureau, and he currently sits on the Texas Beef Council. We'll get our webinar started today by talking about what's in the news. And one of the biggest stories that we report here on the Texas Farm Bureau Radio Network is input prices. Of course, inflation is all around us. We feel it in everything we do today. Now, we know that farmers are usually challenged just about every year by weather, markets, and trade policy, but this year has been a bit different. Commodity prices have mostly increased over the last year, and farm income has been strong, but crop input prices have doubled or maybe even tripled in some cases. Let's talk a bit about how input prices for your critical needs like seed, fertilizer, and crop protection are affecting your operation. Alicia, ladies first. If you don't mind, let's start with you. Let's talk about how those input prices are affecting things on your farm there in Miles, Texas.
Yeah, thanks, Carey. I think, you mentioned that commodity prices have increased, but they have certainly not doubled to match what some of these end prices are doing. And that's an important thing to note. So I believe that on our operation, we try to be progressive and we try to be proactive and utilize technologies and embrace those technologies. But these increases in chemistries and the increase in fertilizer costs have certainly affected some of the decisions that we're making on our operation now and in the future. So you mentioned seed and fertilizer and chemistry as being things to consider. And we've already purchased a lot of our seed for next year. So a lot of the technologies that we would utilize the chemistry for have already been purchased. And that might have been something we would have reconsidered had we kind of, really realized what these inflated prices were going to do. But I would say that the things that we're really focused on changing on our operation for next year are going to be fertilizer practices, as well as chemistry practices. So traditionally, we would use quite a bit of chemical to depress the weed issues or insect issues on our operation. And, we've tried to get away from tillage, but it's something that we're going back to. And an example, I'll use is, not necessarily on our operation, but we have a neighbor who has been no-till in wheat for quite some time. And in fact, he plants with a no-till drill, and he has gone and purchased a field cultivator, and he's going to make a pass through prior to planting his wheat because the chemistry prices are just way too high. Even on irrigated land, it doesn't make it, there's no justification to be able to apply that. From a fertilizer standpoint, a lot of times we would be purchasing fertilizer for next year, and we are reevaluating those decisions as well. We haven't purchased, I don't think, any fertilizer for next year at this point. And we're really going to just kind of wait and see. One of the things that we've really tried not to skimp on in years past has been fertility. It's a really important aspect of crop growth and development. And we put quite a bit of fertilizer on up front, and then we kind of wait and see what's happening throughout the season to put the rest of it on as needed. And we're probably not going to put quite as much on up front this year because of where fertilizer prices are at right now. So, I think those are just some examples that we're, seeing on our farm, but it's certainly changing the trajectory of what we have done in the past and what we will do in the future.
Thanks, Alicia. Appreciate that input. Michael, how about you up there on the Red River in north central Texas? How are input prices affecting your operation?
Oh, Carey, just as Alicia said there, I think it's affecting our area also. Probably, I'm sure Richard's going to say some things too about it, but most definitely in our part of the world, we're a typically dry land county, farming operations a lot. There's a little bit of irrigation, but for the most part, I mean, to just say what Alicia said was, yes, everything is definitely blown out of proportion as far as the cost of these inputs. Definitely a lot of folks looking at different ways of trying to get around this input price situation that we have. We're going to definitely, we've already got our fall wheat planted, and but we were fortunate enough to get some of our crop put in early enough for grazing situations that we were able to purchase our fertilizer early enough to beat some of the price increases. But for our harvest wheat situation, most of it is going on summer fallow farms that we've laid out during the summer. So normally we would put a lot of inputs up front in it with fertilizer, but we're going to we've probably went ahead and just planted, and we're going to just make some decisions later as far as post planting applications of fertilizer on that type of soil. So a lot of things we're looking at. So and probably will adjust more of our acreage in the future as far as for more fallow rotation purposes to try to get around some of these input increases.
Well, Richard, there in South Louisiana, you've got a bit of a different operation than our Texas folks do. Soybeans, rice, and crawfish. How are input prices affecting your South Louisiana farm?
Carey, just like Michael said, and the like, in terms of we're going to have to make some production decisions based on where these input costs come in. Unfortunately, we can't lock in prices like we'd like to in terms of availability. I called a dealer this past week and tried to firm up some bookings, and none are being taken. And as we move into the crop year, southwest part of the state is a big rice crawfish rotation. I think we're going to have producers that are going to make a decision if they're going to take their crop all the way through, or they're going to just go into crawfish depending on prices. So I think you're going to have a little cropping mix decision there. I think you move from the central part of the state and kind of the prairie areas where I'm at, moving north, I think you're going to have producers looking at a different crop mix based on what they can get fertilizer booked out for, whether it be corn, beans, cotton, those kind of scenarios. You're going to have some changeover on the ground that can support it. But in terms of what we're doing and our individual operations moving forward, we're trying to accumulate as much inventory as we can on chemistry that is available and affordable. And like I visited with my consultant this past week, and we're going to make cropping decisions, whether it be going to conventional beans, you know, those mentioned in Texas, you know, some folks are looking at making some cultivative changes, and I think we're going to be doing the same. We're trying to prepare ground because we don't have a lot of glyphosate that we typically use to clean up ground. So we're using tillage instead. So I think everyone's having to make some dynamic changes. And I think the availability of these products is going to dictate some of the crop mix coming up in 2022.
Well, Richard, you mentioned the availability of the products. Kind of a related issue is the supply chain problems that we're looking at. You know, we see that all around us too. We're headed into Christmas. You hear that, you know, if you want that Christmas toy that you want to get your kids, you need to get it now because the supply chain issues are real. You hear the stories about the ships backed up at the ports. We are just not moving product around this globe like we used to. And of course, when supplies are short, you get increased prices, as we've been talking about. But sometimes it doesn't matter what the price is. If you can't get the part you need, it's irrelevant. You know, the parts are in short supply. Vehicles, which are definitely in need all around farms all around the country. It's hard to get a vehicle, used or new. Supply chain issues are affecting everything around us, including us here in agriculture. Let's talk about how the supply chain issues are affecting your farms and ranches. Michael, let's start with you. How is that affecting what you do every day when it's hard to get the parts and equipment that you need?
All right, Carey. Well, especially, I mean, just as of right now, I mean, the last couple of weeks we've been trying to construct some brand new fencing on some of our ranches, and there's not any barbed wire in the county. I mean, none to be found. They don't know when they can get any. And, you know, when it comes to things like that, it gets pretty serious pretty quick. I mean, so we have to alter our decisions on what we're planning on, what we're going to do that day or do for the next couple of few days. So it's just what we do in agriculture. But you know, like not only the barbed wire situation, but just like parts for some of our tractors. I mean, we've had a 4-month wait on parts. I mean, we've had tractors sitting for 4 months because we can't get a part for them. And that becomes definitely a problem for us, you know. I'll give another example. I mean, I had a transmission go out in one of our pickups. Can't even get it looked at for a month, and they don't even know if they can get rebuilt and remanufactured transmissions or anything. So it's just kind of a lot of things up in the air. We're not for sure on a lot of things, but it's definitely this supply chain deal is definitely affecting us, and I know it's probably affecting a lot more folks too. But we can definitely say that, you know, we definitely have some needs on some of our farming and ranching operations as far as equipment, and you know. Some of it makes our decisions, help to make our decisions, or can we work on some of these pieces of machinery for sure? And if we can't work on them, we're probably not going to, you know, we're not going to buy that type of machinery. We'll go ahead and just try to find an older piece of machinery that we can work on and, you know, take care of ourselves instead of having to rely on a lot of the other supply chain issues.
Richard, how about you? You feeling the supply chain pinch there in South Louisiana?
Yeah, Carey, we're not hidden over here and protected from anyone else. I mean, we facing it square on. I have a tractor in the field right now, been down for 12 days with a set of hairs behind it, trying to cover up some ground, waiting on parts. I don't have to tell anyone in agriculture, but time is money and timing is everything in agriculture. I got some friends of mine to the south in the sugarcane industry that are trying to get a crop out right now, and their commercial trucks are getting left on the road because they can't get emission parts and the like for those. So we're having to really reach out, and as Mr. Michael said, go to unconventional means and try to do some interesting diagnostics and repairs to try to get the crop out. And this supply chain shortage is really delaying that. And as we go into 2022, I think we're going to see more of that. I don't see it going away. I think you're going to have a lot of people in some purchasing decisions this winter, going to update equipment. They not, like Michael alluded to, it might be a later model unit, or it might be a pre-emissions unit based on and what the comfort zone on that particular purchaser is, based on parts availability and reliability of a product. Look, you got a $400,000 combine that doesn't run because it doesn't have a $38 sensor, and you can't get one for 2 months. What's that combine worth to you? And I think that's the big picture in terms of all sectors. And agriculture is not, it's not the only sector facing this. You know, with the labor situation and the complacency out there, you can't get things through the mail. You can't get it through the delivery systems, and we're gonna have to do a little more forward thinking. Like my grandfather said, go back to old school, put it on the shelf and take care of it and reuse it, and know what you need if as much as you can and plan ahead. But we definitely got some concerns as we go into 2022 with this situation.
Well, Alicia, I can only assume that the message is the same for you on your farm there in the Concho Valley of Texas. Are y'all having problems getting the parts and equipment and supplies that you need?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just mirror everything that Michael and Richard said. You know, when you've got a $750,000 machine sitting in the field because you can't harvest your cotton crop, it doesn't matter what commodity prices are doing. It's not helpful at all. And the longer that cotton crop sits in the field, the more it deteriorates and the less valuable it is. You know, cotton is graded, and a lot of what we're paid on is quality. And if that quality starts to deteriorate, then it directly affects our bottom line and what we get out of that. So again, it doesn't matter what commodity prices are doing. If we can't get the parts that we need to fix the equipment to get the crop out of the field, it doesn't matter.
Well, Alicia, how are y'all working around that? How are you dealing with that when you've got equipment that can't get done what you need done? What are some of the workarounds and ways that you're innovating to get beyond that?
Yeah, I would say kind of the same thing that everybody's mentioned already, that we're going back to less equipment that has less technology on it, things that have I would say less of an electrical system where we can work on it mechanically, and not have to worry about waiting on some of those parts or somebody to come out and diagnose what the issue is from the dealership because they can't get away because they're backed up at the dealership. So, you know, we're reverting back to practices that maybe we're not accustomed to. And I would say, even as you know, a difference here is that we are a younger generation on our family's operation. And so, you know, my husband, I'll say that he's much more mechanically inclined than I am. So I certainly couldn't go work on the equipment, but he's, you know, his background is in mechanical engineering and that's his degree, and very much understands this and grew up around it. But for me, it's a learning curve. And I would say that it's probably the same for a lot of people in our generation. We're not used to, you know, some of the older tractors, some of the older harvesting equipment. And so we're learning a lot, but it's probably a good thing because this isn't going to be the last time this happens. And it's good for us to learn things like that. But I would say that what we're doing is just having to revert back to older equipment and pull some of that stuff off the lot and fix it and get it back out into the field, whereas maybe it's been sitting still for a year or two.
So it definitely pays to be a farmer with a background in mechanical engineering right now.
Yeah.